Hello all who are with us this evening in this Zoom platform. I would like to welcome you all on behalf of Kurd-Akad UK to our webinar titled Iran's Transformative Moment, Kurdistan on the Frontline. As you are aware, there is an ongoing widespread protest in Rojhelat, Kurdistan and Iran following the martyrdom of Jina Amini. Jina is named Mahsa Amini by the ID of the Iranian state. The main slogan of countrywide protest has become Jin Jiyan Azadi, which means women, life, freedom. This evening we have two speakers, Ms. Bayan Karimi and Dr. Allan Hassaniyan. I will just briefly tell about Kurd-Akad UK, who we are. Kurd-Akad UK was established in 2019, and we organize seminars and webinars related to Kurdish Kurdish problems throughout the Greater Kurdistan and diaspora. We've organized a number of seminars and later mainly webinars because of the COVID-19 era. Our main focus goes on Kurdish-related academic topics, and with the ongoing situation in Rojhelat, Kurdistan, Iran, there was a need to organize this webinar this evening, where we've invited Ms. Bayan Karimi and Dr. Allan Hassaniyan, who kindly accepted to come on board with us this evening. I will introduce briefly who Bayan Karimi is, and then give the mic to her, which will follow with Dr. Allan Hassaniyan's talk. Each of them will have 25 minutes this evening to present their talk. And then from there, we will open the platform for question and answer session, which will take another 30 minutes or so. We aim to finish in 1.5 hours, 8:30 UK time this evening. Bayan Karimi was born in Rojhelat, Kurdistan, joined the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran with her family in 1979. Her family was with the KDPI from 1979 to 1996 in the Kurdistan mountains. In 1996, they moved to UK as refugees. She continued her education here in the UK, currently doing her PhD on Kurdish women movement in Rojhelat from 1979 to 1990s. Bayan, are you here? The mic is now yours. Well, welcome on board, and the mic is now yours. Thank you. Bayan? Yeah.
Today, almost 3 weeks after the murder of Jina Amini, a 20-year-old Kurdish woman from the city of Sakaz by the Iranian security forces, the so-called morality police. A day after her death and after the return of her body to Kurdistan, thousands of protesters gathered at her funeral chanting Jin Jian Azadi. A mixture of sorrow, anger, and deep desire for change turned Gina's funeral into mass resistance. Soon after the funeral, the demonstration spread to all over towns and cities in Rojhelat. Demonstrators occupied the streets chanting Kurdish songs and slogans, demanding the overthrow of the Islamic Republic. Days after, the protests expanded all over Iran's major cities, reaching particularly other oppressed minorities such as Baluch, Azeris, and Arabs in Iran. Chanting Jin Jian Azadi, the movement has also inspired long silenced voices in the country, the Iranian women, who came to the street protesting against compulsory hijab and the Islamic Republic's oppressive gender policies. One of the most outstanding features of these protests is the strong presence of Kurdish women, challenging not only the foundation of the Islamic Republic and its gendered misogynistic politics, but the very foundation of the colonial domination in Rojhelat. This movement did not emerge in vacuum. Neither it's a new development in the history of the struggle. Kurdish women have faced systematic colonial oppression since the formation of Iran in the 1920s. The murder of Jina Amini is not the first tragedy of its kind. Yet it is a reminder over a century-long suppression, continuous massacre, and systematic ethnocide. However, the formation of the Islamic Republic has led to unleashing new waves of violence in Kurdistan. Since the early 1980s, Kurdistan has turned into a military zone. Kurdish villages, towns have been subjected to repeated military attacks. The regime has militarized all over Kurdish homeland, from Maku to Kermanshah and Ilam. Only the military attack against the Kurds since 1979 has caused thousands of civilians to lose their lives. Thousands more have faced execution or imprisonment. The policies of suppression, killing, and execution have been followed by the systematic policies of denial and eradication of Kurdish language, culture, and identity. The deliberate and systematic strategies of de-development have left Kurdistan one of the poorest in Iran. Since the last century, the colonial domination in Kurdistan has produced specific implications for Kurdish women. Facing decades of colonial violence, dehumanization, the criminalization of very existence of Kurdish identity, changing and reproducing new patriarchal structures, not to mention presenting a racist and distorted image of Kurdish women, has left a deep-rooted impact on Kurdish women in general. It has altered the very sense of self, sense of communal identity, and sense of our humanity. The Kurdish women's movement is not new in Rojhelat. Historically, Kurdish women's movement linked and emerged within the broader Kurdish national liberation movement. Forming alliance with their national movement, Kurdish women's demands for national self-determination has been combined with the struggle for gender equality. Kurdish women's movement in Rojhelat first emerged in the 1940s, during the short-lived Republic of Kurdistan in Mahabad. This movement, although short-lived, forming a coalition with the Kurdish national struggle, articulated its specific gender demand, formed its own independent organization, mobilized women in struggle against the colonial domination, as well as for attainment of gender equality. In the aftermath of Republic's demise, Kurdish women movement was silenced over the next 30 years. But in 1979, with the outbreak of the Iranian Revolution, Kurdish women in their thousands joined the anti-Pahlavi protests. The women movement in Kurdistan was become a fundamental and integral part of Kurdish movement. In a short period of time, many Kurdish women unions were formed all over Kurdistan, articulating a very clear and explicit demand for gender equality. However, with the fall of Kurdish cities and the reoccupation of Kurdistan by the Islamic Republic, the new Kurdish women's movement was once again faced backlash. By August 1979, thousands of Kurdish women joined the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran, KDPI, and Komala, the Organization of Toilers of Kurdistan. They took up arms against the chauvinistic Islamic State and its army. In the late 1990s, however, after the demise of Kurdish armed struggle, for many of them, this was followed by exile in the West and subsequent life in diaspora. This did not mean the demise of Kurdish women's struggle in Rojhelat. Kurdish women's struggle continued both in diaspora and in Rojhelat, under a very harsh condition in Iran, often marked by mass arrest, lengthy sentences, and execution. Kurdish women's movement continued its struggle with determination and resilience. Notably from 2000s, Rojhelat witnessed an emergence of various forms of resistance and formation of new civil societies, organization, human rights and women rights organization. To suppress the new emerging Kurdish movement in Rojhelat, at least from 2000, the regime has started another wave of arrest and execution. In 2008, Zainab Jalalian was arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment. Currently known as the longest serving female political prisoner, since her arrest, according to human rights organization, Zainab has been kept in solidarity confinement, facing routine torture while denied access to medical treatment. In 2010, a new wave of execution resumed in Kurdistan. On 10th of May 2008, the horrific news of Shirin Alamholi's execution with 4 other men, including Farzad Kamangar, a teacher, Mehdi Ismaili, Farhad Wakili, and Ali Haydarian, sent shock all over Kurdistan. In 2002, Zara Mohammadi, a Kurdish teacher language and Kurdish rights activist, was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in prison. These acts of atrocities have not deterred the Kurdish women's movement in Rojhelat. These days, we are witnessing a strong and visible re-emergence of a new wave of Kurdish women's movement. Armed with an articulated demand, knowledge and consciousness, showing its sense of agency, is becoming an integral part of Kurdish resistance in this transformative moment. Defining itself within the broader tradition of decolonial feminist and Black feminist movement, the Kurdish women movement at this very moment, linking its intersectional oppression to the colonial domination, it is redefining the very experiences of Kurdish women in Rojhelat. In its political struggle and theoretical framework, this new movement makes an explicit link between colonial violence, the process of racialization, and the reproduction of patriarchy. In other words, chanting Jin Jian Azadi at this moment is a constituting the ground for new possibility. They are more aware that fight against patriarchy or Islamic Republic alone cannot guarantee their freedom. Their emancipation is tightly linked to the process of decolonialization, the achievement of Kurdistan self-determination. Chanting Jin Jian Azadi also constitutes the ground for other new possibilities within the broader Kurdish society and within the Kurdish liberation movement, in which that decolonialization and attainment of Kurdish self-determination will not be achieved without genuine steps to defeat patriarchy within the Kurdish movement and broader Kurdish society. Jin Jian Azadi has been increasingly channeled against patriarchal mindset, misogynistic attitudes, within Kurdish society and Kurdish political movement. We are aware that although Kurdish women always have played critical roles within Kurdish liberation movement, Kurdish movements constantly face marginalization, silence, and exclusion within the Kurdish national movement. It is not clear how the protest movement will evolve or how successful the regime will be in suppressing it. However, what is clear is that there is no turning back. The protest has shaken the very foundation of the regime in Kurdistan as well in other parts of Iran. The voices of Kurds are loud and clear and have been heard by the dominant Persian group, the opposition group, as well as around the world. Overall, the protests promise a new historical era. Demanding Jin Jian Azadi marks a new beginning outside the Islamic Republic and its colonial domination. It marks a new beginning marked by gender equality, the right to life, and a better future. It also promises the idea of decolonialization in Iran. The name Jina Amini, Jin Jian Azadi, has turned into an unprecedented international solidarity of the Iranian and the Kurds. Women across the world, from Afghanistan to United States, are chanting Jin Jian Azadi in solidarity with Kurdish and Iranian women. The slogan has also turned to become an important device for diverse groups of women for attainment of gender equality in their own societies. As for Kurdish women in other parts of Kurdistan, it also has cemented and brought them in different parts of Kurdistan closer and solidarity with each other. It's important to emphasize that the slogan of Jin Jian Azadi first originated from women movement in Bakur. It reached Rojava, particularly during the women's fight against the ISIS, Turkey, and Assad regime. It illustrates the growing power of women's revolution in all parts of Kurdistan. It also shows the growing solidarity and cooperation between the Kurdish women in all parts, in overcoming the borders which have divided them since the separation of Kurdistan by the colonial and imperialist forces at the outset of 20th century. Despite this, there are enormous challenges facing the uprising. As noted, the regime has responded to the uprising with violent attacks against the demonstrators. While the violence is carried out all over the Iran, in places like Kurdistan and Baluchistan, the violence has been more severe. Portraying the uprising as separatist and terrorist, the regime has opened direct fire in both regions, killing dozens. According to human rights organizations, only in Kurdistan, dozens of protesters have been killed and hundreds more have been injured. The exact number of arrests is not unclear, but it is estimated that a few thousand in Kurdistan have been arrested. Kurdish women make up of almost 1/3 of those who've been injured and 40% of those who have been arrested. The fact that the regime cuts the internet in some places and in other, it has been reduced, make it very difficult to have a clear picture of the extent of the violence practiced. The human rights organization and women organization in Kurdistan reports of two kinds of arrests. One is targeted mainly the demonstrators. The other have targeted predominantly Kurdish human rights activists, women activists, writers, journalists, and artists. It is important to emphasize that Kurdish women activists since the formation of this Islamic Republic has been targeted significantly. They have had their share of execution and torture as noted above. Both physical and sexual torture has been used against the Kurdish women as combined racial and gender oppression. Generation violence in prison against Kurdish women has to be read as powerful instrument of the Iranian state colonial ideology to punish, discipline, and subjugate Kurdish women into state political control and domination, as well as reinforcing the traditional gender values. in which Kurdish woman has always subverted from it. As noted above, Gina's case has received widespread attention from the Iranian outside and inside Iran. By translating the Kurdistan slogan of Jen Jian Azadi, many have showed solidarity with Kurdish movement and Kurdish women's movement. These are noted as a very promising step. One can hope that the new generation of the Iranians are taking a genuine step towards decolonialization by recognizing the Kurdish demand for self-determination. It is also promising, as it illustrates that many Iranians want to change the current system and to create new democratic process. Despite differences in political demand in Kurdistan, it looks that there is a growing solidarity that one hopes that it will last. Both wants the total removal of the Islamic Republic. One can hope that the current struggle in Iran and demands for gender equality can expand to struggle against systematic human rights abuses, recognition of over a century of exclusion of non-Persian communities in Iran. However, despite of these promises, the whole picture remains more complex. Today's solidarity and common struggle might change soon. One should not forget that the regime is using Kurdophobia increasingly, presenting the Kurdish uprising as foreign-inspired, separatist, or threatening the integral territory of Iran. This discourse has been effective in diverting the attention from the mass protests happening in Iran. The regime also targeted the Kurdish opposition groups, deliberately to divert attention from growing internal unrest. On 28 September, Kurdish opposition groups in southern Kurdistan were subjected to Islamic Revolutionary Guards drone and missiles attack. The attacks targeted schools, hospitals, and refugee camps, during which 11 were killed, including a pregnant woman, Rehan Kanani, and her unborn child. Kurdophobia is also extended to Iranian opposition and groups and social media. The recent development illustrates that it has become very difficult for the privileged and dominant Persian segment of Iranian society to offer genuine solidarity to the struggle of Kurds and the excluded nation and communities in Iran. Many believe that the Iranian opposition group, with their dominant media network, have failed to give an accurate picture of what is happening in Kurdistan. The silence continues, both abroad and within the protests in Iran. In acknowledging Kurdish struggle of self-determination, in acknowledging the Kurdish people call for end of the Iranian occupation of their homeland. In other words, Kurdish claim and demand for equality in Iran has again raised anxiety within the wider segment of dominant community. The most striking example of this is that since the brutal killing of Gina, within the Iranian media in diaspora, and particularly among the Iranian opposition, Gina's Kurdish identity and her Kurdish name has been concealed. Kurds in diaspora and inside Roshalat observed this with concern. Under the hashtag Mahsa Amini, in unprecedented scale, both international media and Iranian media has tried to describe her as an Iranian woman, and he's used her official Persian name, Mahsa. Many believe that Gina's murder has been extensively used in the Iranian opposition social media for their own political goals. And they are displaying very explicit colonialistic attitude by obscuring Gina's Kurdish name and identity, and instead using her imposed Persian name in Mahsa. There has been no acknowledgement to the fact that Gina's name and her story illustrate the vulnerability of the Kurds in Iran. The fact that in Iran, there is a widespread ban of Kurdish names, which forces many families like Gina's family to register their children officially with non-Kurdish names. Many also believe that it is possible that morality police targeted Gina and killed her because they were aware of her Kurdish identity. However, regardless of whether Gina's Kurdish played any vital role in her violent killing, concealing her Kurdish name and her Kurdish identity represent a reproduction of colonial domination and continuous denial of Kurdish identity in Iran. There has been other development too. Recently, a new slogan have emerged in Iran: man, homeland, and reconstruction is replacing Jin, Jiyan, Azadi as the main slogan of the protesters in Iran's central cities. Many view this also with concern in Kurdistan. The replacement of Jin, Jiyan, Azadi is widely viewed as patriarchal resistance against growing demand for gender equality, as well as growing Persian nationalist anxiety over the Kurdish and non-Persian and other non-Persian communities' demand for self-determination. For many, the new slogan of man, homeland, and reconstruction reads as patriarchy, Iranian Persian nationalism, and suppression of minorities. Such attitudes also visible within different feminist groups in Iran, framing the new movement as anti-hijab or feminist movement, often seen as a deliberate attempt to obscure the roles played by Kurdish women movement and their specific and particular demands. There is no doubt that the Islamic State brutality has been expanded to many segments of Iranian society, especially Iranian women. Iranian women, since the formation of Islamic Republic, has faced systematic oppression. In 1979, compulsory hijab was imposed. It became a symbolic in asserting the state control over women's body and their lives. Through its repressive state machinery, Iranian women collectively were subjected to re-education. The Islamic Republic reduced women to second citizen in all aspects of socio-economic, political, individual, and family life. The initiation of protests in Kurdistan was crucial in bringing masses of Iranian women to the street, demanding the end to patriarchy. However, the fight against compulsory hijab, while becoming symbolic context for gender equality, is not sufficient to understand the specific and different experiences of Kurdish women. Historically, the Iranian hegemonic feminism from right to left has been implicit in silencing Kurdish women's voice. Universaling their own gendered experience, demand of Kurdish women for recognition of their specific intersectional oppression has fallen off deaf ears. They have continued to turn blind eyes on Kurdish women's experiences. The relation between race, colonialism, class, and gender has not yet found a place in the theoretical and political framework of the dominant hegemonic feminism. It's important to re-emphasize that a very few have now using Gina's real name. By using Mahsa instead of Gina, yet there is a clear manifestation that they are complicit in the oppression against the Kurds and Kurdish women movement. A true solidarity is only possible when we acknowledge Gina's real name. It is only possible to learn again to chant Jin, Jiyan, Azadi and acknowledge its true meaning and its history. These mean refuting the policies of ethnocide and forced assimilation. However, it's also worth reminding ourselves that a genuine sisterhood can only be achieved when we are all freed. Presumed and superficial concept of sisterhood based only on gender oppression will continue to obscure and marginal Kurdish women and their struggle to overcome colonial racist gender oppression. A genuine sisterhood is only possible if, I have 2 minutes, if a space for dialogue is open. These dialogues mean opening space for Kurdish women to give account of their life experiences. I am going to finish this. A future remains unclear. Only yesterday, the regime turned to streets in Sana'a into bloodbath. The fear is growing that as the protests are getting more intense, the regime may continue with mass killing of the protest. A situation with threat not improving, many more might be killed in silence. I have one poetry to read. If you give me, it's from Kurdistan. I really want to finish with that poem. That is our own, that is why our own unity and solidarity is more urgent now than ever. I would like to end this talk with the following word I saw recently in a video circulated in social media. I believe it captures the essence of the protest in Kurdistan's Roshalat. Because of Kurdistan, for Jin Jian Azadi, because of Jina, her colonial imposed name Mahsa, because of millions Kurds forcibly removed to Khurasan, Qazvin, and Kalardash, because of denial and erasure of Kurdish identity, because of occupation of Kurdish homeland, for Kurdistan's flag, because of Roshalat, which is Sna, Urumia, Kermanshah, and Ilam, for Kurdish knowledge, homeland, history, and culture, because of Kurdish language, in spite of its denial and suppression, because of now and today, Jinjian Azadi is changed across the world in Kurdish, chanted, sorry, for Peshmergas and guerrillas, for independence, because of suppression, the development and colonialism in Kurdistan, because of assimilating of Kurds, because of changing and destroying Kurdistan demography, because of 60,000 of Kurds killed during the Islamic Republic, because of mountains, trees, river, villages, and cities of Kurdistan, because of Qazi Muhammad, Farzad, Zainab, and all of those executed and imprisoned by the Islamic Republic for attainment of self-determination. And I am adding because of unborn child of Ra'na Kanani, who was killed on 28th of September. Thank you very much.
Dear Bayan, for your time and this very informative talk, which you have constructed really well, I should say. Zor Spas, Bayan Khan. I will take the mic from you until we go on to the question and answer session. Introduce you, Dr. Allan Hassaniyan. Allan is a lecturer in Middle East Studies at the Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies and Center for Kurdish Studies at the University of Exeter. Hassaniyan's research and publications record includes work on Kurdistan, Iran, and Iraq. He has authored and co-authored many peer-reviewed journal articles in languages including Kurdish, Danish, and English, published by nationally and internationally recognized publishers. Hassaniyan also authored the book Kurdish Politics in Iran, Cross-Border Interactions and Mobilization Since 1947. It was with Cambridge University Press, 2021. Dr. Allan, thank you very much for being with us this evening. The mic and the floor is yours now. You have 25/30 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jaspas, and hello, and thank you very much, everyone, for being with us this evening to discuss and reflect some of the thoughts, and hopefully later on having some conversation about the current situation in Kurdistan and Iran. So yeah, as the title of this webinar says, Iran's transformative movement, Kurdistan on the front line. I basically, before everything, have to say thank you very much for Dada Bayan to share her thoughts, quite insightful actually, not just with regarding how the movement has formed, but also reflecting on the gender women movement in Rojhelat and its emergence, because it's quite understudied, really also undermined, not just with general Kurdish studies, but I mean, like especially I mean, I try to say not just with gender studies generally, but also within the women movement in the greater Kurdistan. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and giving the voice for those who through the history of the Kurdish movement women just side by side, shoulder by shoulder with Kurdish men, Peshmerga and guerrilla fought for their freedom and the freedom of the Kurdish people at all. Thank you very much. So I try to justify through my reflection to say some aspect of this, why Kurdistan is in the front line. I think Bayan has already mentioned a huge part of that, which I really appreciate and took huge part of the shoulder, the burden from my shoulder. Thank you very much. So I think my talk would be quite shorter, and I'm sure we would have a very useful and informative conversation later on. So I think it's very important to understand the Kurdish situation in Rojhelat, similar to other parts of Kurdistan, that the 20th century, the rise of the nationalism of the others to Kurds, Turkish, Arab, and Iranian nationalism has become a turning point for the emergence of a new era of Kurdish movement. So in this regard, the emergence of the Iranian nation state in the 1925, led by Raza Shah Pahlavi, was a moment which could mobilize the movement in a modern sense, with many ideologies of nationalism became more like articulated. So, and it's because the Iranian society from the very early moment of its emergence in terms of a nation state became quite discriminative to the others, which Persian identity, Persian culture, language became the main element of this Iranianness, and all the others, these elusive others, because it's one of the problem with Iranian nationalism is unlike Turkish nationalism, which is quite proud to promote itself. It denies the existence of such a Iranianness, which is excluding the others. So it has made actually the struggle for the others, in this case the Kurds, the Baluchi, the Azeri, the Arab, quite difficult, because denial, it is multiplied in terms of being included in the mainstream national identity, but also another form of denial is that actually that such a situation doesn't exist, because Iranianness from the perspective of those who have ruled the country is quite inclusive, and it has made the struggle quite difficult. It is a sense of Kurdishness somehow and sometimes quite difficult even justify to the Kurds of other part of Kurdistan, because there is a, maybe for those who are not politicized and are not part of the Kurdish movement, it's quite difficult to understand, because Iran as a territory, Kurds have ruled for millennia, and suddenly Kurds are subject is unbelievable. That's why I think that has made the Kurdish movement quite difficult. Anyway, modernity in Iran was enforced in a quite schizophrenic way, and it has continued until quite recent days. So, and it is like highlight that Iran is a quite divided in terms of its identity, but never recognized by the official. And Iran is a land when it comes to the revolution and uprising, and again come back to the term transformative, because in Iran we have many examples of revolutions, uprising, which the center has always been in the focus, and the periphery of the country with its minority national group never have become part of this discourse. Never mind, the important fact in this regard is that the reason for the failure of this revolution is that they never met the general public's desire for democratic change. So what we see in the current situation is actually in terms of transformativity, we see some sort of, without romanticizing it, and making to a hasty conclusion, we see some indications for, especially on the surface, that Iranian of all nationalities have, expressed some sort of solidarity at that stage with the gender uprising in Kurdistan, which is related to the murder of Jina and the uprising which started following the murder of Jina, started in Sakkas and spread to other Kurdish provinces, Kermanshah, Ilam, Lorestan, and then we see in a short time, Tehran university student actually again in Tehran, Kurdish women leading and starting to protest and shouting the Kurdish slogan of Jinjian Azadi. So definitely it is very important as Kurds, or from the Kurdish perspective, to recognize, promote, and fight for it. Because as Bayan mentioned, we see the challenge of the Kurds is not just related to the state, but we see those even in exile, Iranian, are trying to, with all means, to exclude this voice. Okay, Iranian medias in diaspora, through the demonstrations, for example, seeing any sign of Kurdishness. We have seen several images in Stockholm, in Berlin, which Kurdish protesters actually have been attacked by Iranian nationalists just because they either dressed Kurdish clothes or had the Kurdish flag. So it means that actually the fragility of the situation and the challenges the Kurds are facing, not just at home in Kurdistan, but also in diaspora, which is actually the denial that has been quite institutionalized, not just in the state institution, but in every individual of the superior community, which is the Persian one. I would like actually to share with you one of the experience I had when I start to give organize events related to what happens in Kurdistan and in Iran. I have received email signatories that I was asked to change the title of this presentation and my paper and the content of my presentation, because they found misleading why Kurdistan should be on the front line. And it's been justified, because Kurdistan, through, it's not just like for decades, but from the uprising of Simcoe in 1918, have fought centralization of power and asked for national self-determination. And this spirit has been carried by different movement leader until current days. And one good example in this regard is to mention is that in 1979, when Iran had a failed revolution, and we had in Iran, or probably not we, the Iranian had the referendum for the Islamic Republic, the Kurd and the Kurdish movement boycotted this movement. And as I say, it was a difficult choice, but made by heart. And the Kurds have until today have paid the price for this decision. However, it shows that Kurdistan has a huge potential for security, the dynamic of the Kurdish movement for the region, for not just for Iran, in terms of democratization of the region. But the thing is that it has been excluded, is tried continuously to be denied by forces of chauvinism and fascism all around the region. And however, the persistence and the courage of Kurds, despite paying all the prices they have paid, as Bayan mentioned, it is one of the not just symbolic, but as a reality of the Kurdish potential for change, but also the Kurds for themselves to keep that demanding they are leading and they have to be listened to. So in this regard, I think that it is the reality, it's not exaggeration if we say that the blood of Jina became the fuel of this uprising in Iran. Okay, and doesn't matter how much denial the Kurds are facing, repeating and arguing this is worse to do. So, and in the funeral, we saw the Kurdish women in Sakaz through the hijab. That's true. That it is a very important part of the Kurdish movement to men, similar to women, have the equal right, and it was an indication that that claim is quite alive, and it was highlighted by the Kurdish women at the funeral. And we saw that that Jina, when they saw dearest Jina, you never die, your name becomes a symbol. It quickly did, actually, because we saw how it spread, and we saw that how Kurds actually once again became the name in the international stage to promoting, similar to Rojava. Kurdish women are again on the front line. And just going to another aspect, I think these national diversity in Iran, it is a very difficult thing to also ignore, because in terms of identity, as I said, Iran is fundamentally fragmented society, and what we see again, actually, that that state is trying to conceal by force this diversity in terms of the argument that the others are excluded, but it comes to surface again, because the point is that Iranian nationalism that is in essence a declaration of Persian supremacy, and the Kurds have been actually a main victim, because as the Iranian and some other scholars always claim that the Kurds are the true Aryan people, and then in the time of the revolution and onward, we've been the fellow Aryan and Muslim brothers, according to official statement of the state. But the reality is that the Kurds are neither the Aryan fellow Aryan and nor the Muslim brothers, because the exclusion Kurd have been subjected to, the brutality and suppression Kurd in Iran have been subjected to. It is a issue we are repeatedly experiencing in the 21st century. But what is very important in this regard is that the spirit of Kurdish claim for self-determination, it is alive, and Kurd has proved once again that they are not submitting to states' assimilation policy, and the price, whatever the price has been, they have been ready to pay and carry the struggle. And as Bayan mentioned, actually, we have just entered the fourth week of the protest, and then we see actually that this sense of solidarity has, we have to be a bit actually pessimistic. This excitement is going away, as Kurds have proven to be on the front line, and then the sensitivity to this is expressed by those we are actually encountering, both inside the country and outside. And as soon we try to raise their voice, the Kurd protester activists try to raise their voice, they are encountering the argument of be silenced, because it will affect the unity. So it means actually the unity is not as genuine as people perceive, and then actually it should be a unity that is serving regime change without any good result for the Kurdish people. And it's again re-emphasize the reality Kurds have to be more aware of their situation, that in a undemocratic Iran, doesn't matter, it is the Pahlavi or the Islamic Republic, the Kurdish people have to be very aware in the reality they are living in. Of course, it's very important that we also appreciate any solidarity coming from anyone, but with open eyes and open ear to see how genuine it is. It is a matter to you to be an instrument of this struggle, or you are equally accepted part of this struggle. Because as I always argument, that's true. The peoples in Iran have fed up of the regime. They want a regime change, but the desire, the claim, and the ambition for the regime change after regime change is quite different compared to what we see in the center and in the periphery for the people like Kurds and Baluchi. Okay, so unless this reality is recognized, we won't have any positive progressive kind of change in Iran. It will be just a repetition and maybe another failed revolution. So we are all the time facing new realities because we have many forces, which is not just limited to the regime and regime institution. We have Kurds actually have powerful forces outside the country, which are lobbying in different ways to exclude the Kurdish voice to like approach and be recognized by democratic forces, by institutions in like different democratic societies around the world, and they are tried to be reduced as the voice of the Iranian. With all respect, that's good. We have this solidarity movement, we have this support wherever it is come from, but I think the Kurdish claim, similar to other subaltern communities and people in Iran, to be recognized. So in Iran, because that's true, we don't know where the direction of this movement is heading toward, but the reality is the regime has its forces have eroded. We will soon or later actually see a collapse of the regime and a regime change. It's too early to say how, okay, but I'm sure with this development, if it continue, and it is many prospects for it will continue, that regime change is a reality. But whether this regime change is responding to and answering the Kurdish claim for self-determination, I'm not quite sure how it will like proceed in this regard. The regime is all the time trying to militarize this movement, especially in the periphery. And as Bayan mentioned, the way regime is dealing with protesters is by itself quite discriminative, because they are using water and pepper spray and other like measures in major cities like Tehran and Isfahan, okay? But in Kurdistan, in Baluchistan, the situation has been quite different. We already have seen that in the Bloody Friday, which was last Friday, more than 100 defenseless Baluchi have been killed just because they were protesting. And then the regime is actually planting its spies with either having Kurdish dressed as in Peshmerga and guerrilla or Baluchi fighters among the protesters to justify using high tech like helicopter and things they cannot like actually dare to use in other part of Iran. So yeah, in Baluchistan, the sad reality, the regime has tried from very early days of the uprising to actually encourage the armed forces, the Peshmerga and guerrilla, to come back and mix with the people. And we have seen videos around, circulating that Peshmerga, Democrat, we need you to come back, for example, to make a trap, and then use this as an excuse to deal with this movement as our movement. However, the movement has been quite peaceful, and Kurdistan has shown which we haven't seen really in other parts of Iran. The latest one was the Green Movement in 2009. But in Kurdistan, at least in the last decade, we have dozens of general strike, which had the support of the all 5 provinces in Kurdistan, in Rojhelat. Okay, just since the murder of Jina, and in I think it was 17 or 19 September until today, Kurdistan actually had 3 major general strike combined with other civic activism measures. However, the regime has tried and is trying to use different measures to militarize this movement. So far, it has failed, but it just shows that the regime has a different attitude to the Kurdish society, the Kurdish uprising. And today in the city of Sna, we had several martyrs. I think so far we have 400 injured with other cities. So it means that actually the uprising have in Kurdistan been quite consistent, but also in other parts of Iran too. The consistency of the Kurdish movement is that actually is attracting more sections of the society than we have seen in like 2 weeks ago. Yesterday and the day before yesterday, we have seen school teacher in Kurdistan made declaration, have also joined the movement in greater number, and the solidarity, not just in a symbolic way, but in reality, have been quite strong, especially to the Baluchi people, which Kurdish teacher posted photos on social media giving blood and sending blood to the people of Baluchistan, which is like, actually, I see it is what the genuine sort of solidarity to the oppressed people. I think another example of this Kurdistan being on the front line, I'm sure the Baluchi as well, and the Azeri as well has also shared solidarity actually with the Kurd, is that like the Azeri said, Kurdistan is in front line. We actually supporting Kurdistan, made the similar for the Azerbaijan, which is really great. Kurdistan in 1979, 1980, when the defenseless people in Turkmenistan, in the Turkmen Sahara era of Iran, in the northern part of Iran, have been massacred. So Kurdish doctors and nurses and civil society in buses actually were sent to support the Turkmeni people as a very important gesture of solidarity. So I think that the Kurds, not in a romantic way, in a very real politic way, should be very proud of themselves, that through the history have been the Kurdistan has been really a stronghold for a progressive movement in Middle East. But in those parts, especially in Rojhelat, we have many indication and example that Kurdistan really have, while itself the Kurdish people suffering from brutality and different example of isolation, still have had the energy and time and resources to open their arm for other progress forces without like thinking that much about where they come from. Yeah, I think I would like to stop here so we have some time for having a conversation, and thank you very much. And yeah, thank you.
Mithat, you are muted. We cannot hear you.
Sorry, yes. I said thank you very much, especially for your timekeeping, Allan, and Zor Spaz for accepting our invitation and sharing your valuable knowledge on this topic with us this evening. I'm sure all the participants this evening have benefited a lot from both of these insightful talks. We now have a good half an hour to offer the mic to our participants. Although the language of this evening webinar is English, you can choose to ask your questions in Kurdish and in any dialects of Kurdish. Could I please ask you to raise your question by pressing the digitally for a right of question. Once given the mic, could we please ask you to turn your camera on and give your name before you ask your question, if possible, obviously. Finally, could you please avoid any lengthy comments and ask your questions directly, as we would like to see as many participants as possible to have the mic for their questions. We will to Zoom platform for question and answer session, but where needed, we might pick a couple of questions from other social media platforms that we live on. And in that case, we would ask the question on behalf of the person. For any question and answer, any questions that you may have, sorry. Mehmet has a...
Sheila has a question. She raised her hand.
And Mustafa Hamo, we will give the mic to the three in order, Sheila, Mehmet, and Mustafa. So Sheila Khan, the mic is yours, and if you could turn your camera on only if you feel comfortable, obviously. Thank you.
زۆر باشە، سڵاو بە ڕێزانم کاتان باش. ئەگەر ئاسایی بێ پرسیارەکانم بە کوردی ئەەکەم و داوا لێبوردنەکەم لۆژ کامێڕێ ناکەمەوە لەبەرەوەی یەکەم زۆر گونجاویە بە داوا لێبوردنەوە. دووبارە سڵاو ئازیزان و بەڕێزان، زۆر خۆشحاڵ بووم کە لەو کۆنڤەرزیشنە بەشدار بووم. ئەگەر بترێ پرسیارەکەم زیاتر لۆخات و بەیانە، بەڵام پێشەوە ویستم ناساندێکی خۆم بکەم. ئەمێن شەهلام لە زانکۆی سۆران لە باشووری کوردستان و مامۆستام لەباری سیاسەت و پەیوەندی نێودەوڵەتیەکان. بەداوا لێبوردنەوە پرسیارەکەم لەوێ زۆر بەلانی تیۆریدا بڕواتن، بەتابێت تیۆری فیمینیزم کە نزیکە لە پسپۆری خۆمەوە. لۆی ئەگەر ئاساییە هەر یەکێک لەو بەڕێزانە ویستی کۆمنتی زیاتر بدا یان حەز نەکات جواب داتەوە لە اختصاسەکەی دووربیت، بۆ خۆشحاڵە بەم زۆر بەلامەوە ئاساییە بیت. بەڵێ پرسیارەکەم لە ڕاستیدا دوو پرسیارن ئەگەر قبوڵی بکەن. پرسیار یەکەمیانم ئەوەیە ئایا پەیوەندی چیە لە نێوان بژوتنەوەی ڕزگاری خوازی کورد و ئازادی ژنان؟ بەواتایشتر ئایا گرنگی ئازادی و شوناسی نەتەوەی گەلان لۆ بژوتنەوەی فیمینیزم لەکوێدایە؟ بەمانایەکی دیکە ئێمە دەتوانین وەکو ریسێرچەر لێکچەر ئێمە دەتوانین بەهۆی ئەو دۆخەی کە ژنان هەم لە ڕۆژئاوا هەم لە ڕۆژهەڵاتی کوردستان کە بەشدارن لە بزوتنەوەی ڕزگاری خوازی گەلی کوردستان، بەهۆی ئەمەوە ئێمە دەتوانین بڵێن کە پرسی نەتەوەی چیتر پرسێکی پیاوانە نییە. هەروەکو فێمینیستەکان وەکو خاڵێکی زەوهەری تاکید لەسەر قسەیەکەنەوە، ئایا مەتوانین ئەوە بگۆڕین، ئەو دیدگا فێمینیستی خۆر ئاواییە بگۆڕین کە پێی وابوو پرسی ڕزگاری نەتەوەی پرسێکی پیاوانەیە، لۆیە زەرر لە خودی ژن ئەدا، زەرر لە ئایدیای و لە توانای ژن ئەدا بەهۆی ئەو دۆخی نەتەوەیەوە ژنان ئەکەونە نێو شەڕێکەوە کە ئەوان ئەکتەری سەرەکی نین، ئەکتەری بڕیاردان لەو بابەتە نین. بەڵام وە هەست دەکەم ئەو دۆخێکە لە کوردستانی ڕۆژهەڵات و ڕۆژ ئاوا ڕوویدایە ئێوێ ئەو دیدگا فێمینیستیە بگۆڕێ. نازانم جاو بە ڕێزانە لەگەڵ قسەی مندان یان خود خوێندنەوەی ئەوان لەسەر ئەم بابەتە چیە. و هەروە پرسیاری دومیشم بریتە لەوەی ئەو ڕووداوەی کە ژینا ئەمینی بەداخەوە لە ڕۆژهەڵات ڕوویدا، ئایا لە دیدگای فێمینیستەکانەوە یاخود لە دیدگای خاتووگان وەکو چاڵەکوانێکی ژنان ئەم دۆخە ئەگەر ببوورن ئەو قسەیەکەم جودای کەمەوە لە هەستی نەتەواتیم ئەو دۆخەی کە ڕووداە ئایا بەرقەرارکردنی ئەمن و ئاسایشە لۆگەلی کورد یان شتێکدانی ئاسایشی دەوڵەتی ئێرانە لە ڕوانگەیەکی مەبەستم ژنانیوە لە ڕوونامی لە ڕوانگەنەتەوەی خۆمەوە قسە بکەم زۆر سپاسدانەکەم ئەگەر ڕای خۆم لەسەر دوو بابەتە پێبرێن و دووبارە ڕێز و سڵاوم هەیە لەو بەڕێزانە وە سەری وازیشیش دانوێنم لەو شەهیدە بەڕێزانەی کە لە ڕۆژهەڵاتی کوردستان لە پێناوی ئازادیدا گیانیان خەبات کرد بەداخۆم بەس ئینشەڵڵا هیوا و ئاواتێکی گەشە بلوگەلی کورد دووبارە خۆشحاڵم ڕێز و سڵاو.
If you don't mind, we will ask the speakers to have their answer in English so that the wider audience can understand it. And Bayan Khan and Dr. Allan, if I ask you to pick each question and answer one each, please.
هذا بيان فرموته. شو معنى دنقتنية؟ We can't hear.
Khatu Shahla, thank you very, very much for attending and thank you for your questions. Yeah, they're really important question, I think. To be honest, it's not very straightforward to actually talk about the relation between gender, nationalism, gender national liberation movement, feminists' vision on gender liberation movement. These are really completely, complex questions. But if I look at the Kurdish context, nationalism has been very important. National movement has always been very important for Kurdish women. Kurdish women, like Kurdish men, have been subjected to national oppression. Kurdish women, like Kurdish men, has suffered, but even more from personal experiences. We know that, Kurdish woman has taken very heavy burden, not only of national oppression, but also of national liberation movement. But from historical point of view, we have been very marginalized within Kurdish movement. Kurdish women also always have been a masculine movement. We have always been constructed as in a marginalized space. Even when we pick up arms, the national movement doesn't really easily change the patriarchal concept of national movement. I have been part of national movement myself, and I have personal experience of how difficult it is to make changes because men tend to oppressed men or tend to define national subjugation through his own experience of subjugation. It's never been a woman who have voice to describe how we experienced. But there is promising. Kurdish woman has always fought. Kurdish woman has very strong and visible movement. I mean, I don't know if you are aware, in 1979, Kurdish women joined Komala, KDPI, Hizb Democratic Kurdistani Iran. One of them opened more space, particularly within military. The other one, which I was involved, we still had, our own visible rule, but we were increasingly marginalized. Now things has changed. I think there is, we are growing our voices. We have more understanding. We have, we are more powerful as, Kurdish women movement. We also have, experiences, and these experiences is vital for us. I mean, my mother was joined Kurdish movement in 1970s. I do have experience of a generation before me that they are vital of how can we change the mentality of Kurdish movement? How can we, change the structure of Kurdish movement? I think we are more aware, and particularly as you also yourself talked about it, Rojava, it's been a good experience. Rojava has introduced us to new concept. You know, it has been very empowering for us. So I do not see the future as, you know, black and white. I do see a lot of future. I think also I have to say that I'm comparing Kurdish movement with other national liberation movement. I mean, we have extensive space. We have pushed Kurdish nationalist movement to give us space. We have re-articulated their concepts. We have used the very little space that they have given us to actually increase our demands, our presence, our visibility. And this is not going to change. This is going to only get better. And we've seen this in the recent movement of Jina. And I think that's all I can share. But as I said, as you also mentioned, the relationship between feminism is very complex with the nationalism. And we have to take into account that there is never one feminism. There are feminisms, and you know, majority of the experiences that we've been told is, yes, from decolonial states that they themselves become colonialists, like Iran, you know, during the decolonization, used woman question for transformation of gender relation, but really didn't. Neither under Pahlavi and under Islamic Republic, we saw that never women's true emancipation was granted. So we have these experiences, but also we have, you know, genuine experiences of Rojava that very important step has been taken. I'm not saying that Rojava has attained gender equality or is going to have a gender equality in a very near future, but Rojava has been very, very important in breaking that myth that the national liberation movement is completely contradiction to feminism. I mean, that myth, I think, at least in our part, has actually demising. But as I said, there is a lot of trends within feminism. There's a lot of ways that this history has been, you know, recaptured or reinterpreted. So hopefully, but I let Dr. Allan, Allan, answer the second question. I think it's important.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I try to make it very brief so the other have also time. I think it's very important too, especially this question, if I have understood correctly, the security, okay? The security of the state is quite different from the security of the Kurdish people, okay? Their security means we should be silent. So I have a lot of hope that this chaotic situation will bring us security in terms of right for men, women, and Kurdish society, and hopefully for other parts of Iran as well. It's very important, as I also mentioned, to recognize this reality. I'm not an expert of gender study, but my experience is that, for example, or maybe it's the reality for me, that the Kurdish gender feminist movement is totally different, you know, compared to those who always have this privileged situation. As I said, we should recognize that our claim, even though our target is the same system, our claim is too different and we have different desires, okay? And Kurdish women are a subject of intersectional exclusion and discrimination. Means that gender, patriarchal, you know, national identity, and so on. And it is something we observe when we see, for example, Persian-dominated Iranian gender study, how they try to push aside Kurdish gender movement and try to ignore it, okay? So, and it just shows that actually we are so different. And this gender study, feminist movement, I'm saying based on my experience, Iranian gender study is very discriminative. I know we have great names which they are promoting, very few. However, the general one, which is promoting the Iranian one, they are quite discriminative and try to actually marginalize and you know, exclude Kurdish women as far as they say, any element of Kurdishness with this Kurdish movement. I think, as I promised, make it brief. So yeah, hopefully it answers some of your question.
Mehmet Kurd, the mic is yours now for your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kurd-Akad, for organizing this, and thank you very much for presenters, and thank you for providing us with a very comprehensive picture of what is going on and in this historical trajectory. And let me also share my appreciation for the clarity of Rojhelati scholars and Rojhelati people for taking the situation as it is in terms of its coloniality. So I'll make it brief. I have two questions, Zorspas. One of it, now a few weeks into the protests, how does it look? Like in all these protests across the Middle East, usually either we end up in a revolution or we end up in a more repressive governmentality that emerges from this and like kind of lost of even like, you know, further rights. This is the first question. And the second one is, how the political parties and organizations in Rojhelati Kurdistan responded to this situation, and do you see any unity around protests or organization in this? Thank you very much.
I'm not sure. Allan, do you want to respond to some of it?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much, Kak Mahmoud. Our pleasure.
Dr. Allan, as you stressed, if we could keep it briefer, yes, so we can give voice to others. Thank you.
Yes, no problem at all. Regarding the unity, I will start with the second question. I think without because we have such fragmentation, unfortunately. However, we see some unified voice in terms of how to deal, even without making, shared statement. But actually, it is an expression of unity, which way the Kurds inside Rojhelat should go. So I think it is promising, even though we are approaching our political parties all the time in a, quite critically to force them to be more unified. Okay, so I see a lot of hope actually. Okay, and we see the link, even though the geographical connection, because we have movement in mountain, seems quite disconnected, but the reality shows something else, because we see that how this movement inside and outside are inspiring each other. So yes, it is promising actually. And I think that which direction it goes, it is very unclear. Okay, I have a good picture of Kurdistan, but there is a lot of example of horror, because regime is treating things quite differently. And we see actually the voices outside, which we see revelation day after day, how different forces try to actually marginalizing us, not just. So in all around Iran, we see that it still needs to become a revolution. Major sectors like the Bazari merchants, the major industries, worker of like the oil industry, quite important one, and the general public sector employees to join this movement. We see in Kurdistan, for example, maybe in Baluchistan as well, but it's not necessarily the case all around Iran. That's why it is too early to give a good indication which direction it exactly goes. Okay, so thank you.
I just wanted to add something to what Allan said. In terms of unity, I think what is missing at the moment, I mean, I have seen a few examples of good, articulated statement that came recently out, but what I am observing mostly in the true Persian media networks, when they interview the Kurdish leaders, particularly from Komala and KDPI, it's very, very ambiguous way that they are trying to portray. It's even, I sense fear in them, yeah? It's completely, for me, it's very encouraging to see kind of your leaders that not able to articulate really well what is happening in Kurdistan. So basically it is kind of, it's partially to do with our colonialized mentality, you know, our fear when we speak to Persian. But also another trend I am observing is mainly comes from, you know, the leftist, Iranian Kurdish leftists. I think Allan is mainly aware of it. This is also been, particularly in the demonstration, I have experienced many times in the last 2 weeks that there's a lot of objection to Kurdish flag, that they, not only from the monarchist or right-wing groups that I'm expecting them to hate Kurdish flag, but even from Kurdish left, that they just see this as a symbol of, you know, kind of whatever they experience, you know, nationalism, they understand nationalism as so it's been a bit discouraging. I don't have that optimism that Allan has, but I wish there was. Yes.
Very much to both of you. Mustafa Hamo, the mic is yours now. Please come with your question.
Okay. So I have to do the vice versa. Okay.
We don't have particularly a very long time.
That's fine. Okay. First question to Allan. Do you think if Kurds spearhead this demonstration in Iran, what are the risks involved if this movement, I guess it is doomed to fail? Do you think the Kurdistan will not pay a high price for their involvement in this movement? Because logically speaking, the regime, I'm from Rojava. We know how regime is entrenched in the Middle East powers. He's not an easy moving. All the Shia militias around the Middle East. I even heard that they are deploying now some Iraqi Hashd in some cities in Iran to suppress to take on the protests. So even if we feel somehow driven by emotion, but in the long run, we have to be very careful and skeptical. And because we have a previous experience which will not, make us think once again, more than one time, to what's the next step, because there is no guarantees that we will get anything, even if the regime is overthrown overnight.
Okay, thank you, Kak Mustafa, for your question. Yeah, interesting. I would disagree that it's doomed to fail because it's a movement of the people. Okay, so far is a movement of the people, is not triggered by external forces, which is not the case of Kurdistan. Okay, and especially in Rojava, which I'm sorry, this self-reliance in terms of getting access. Of course, you have to approach any movement, and no one has guaranteed, and there is no guarantee that it will succeed. But I think it is just like part of the Kurdish movement, always been like that. Any silence means like actually backlash in terms. So yes, there are so many risks. There are so many examples of things we should calculate in terms of we are facing. Okay, so I think what is important, it is not something excited movement, because I think yes, movement is a matter of emotion as well, but the Kurdish society, what I understand, without any excitement and too much optimism, is quite politicized. Okay, they know they not necessarily have a leader for every step they take, but they are really familiar with their situation. Okay, and really the way they acted, of course, it was Gina's murder that triggered this one, but it's also reality that the Kurdish society are not really subjugating and submitting, okay, to brutality, and especially in this case when it comes to the women, to the Kurdish women. I think that taking this responsibility as society, doesn't matter the cost, it is really important. We have seen numerous women have been killed around Iran. None, even the Persian dominant one with all power, could stand up and protect and like actually not just condemning, protesting. But in Kurdistan, they have done it. I think that's true. We have no guarantee, but a lot of optimism. There, as Dr. Qasim said, "Galek azadi devet, the people who want freedom, freedom has a price." Okay, so I think this price we have been during century is not new, and I'm not sure that tomorrow the regime will fail. But I'm very optimistic in terms of, the Kurdish blood will not go waste with the blood of other revolutionaries around, world and Iran as well. I know it's not exactly the answer to your question, but I tried. Thank you.
Kake Said Kaskin, Fermo, the voice is yours for your question.
باشه اودم همیدمی و باش گلک پیشکشه که باش بود دستی و خوش دکتر آلان و بیان خانم. My question is about Kurdistan's political parties in Rojhelat. Recently, Siaman Moini has made an interview with a journalist or a TV station stating that if the situation in Rojhelat get worse, that we can take some measures in order to administrate the Rojhelati cities. So in this context, there are so many condemnations by Hizb Democratic Kurdistan Iran and so on. While they are stating this, we see that the Jin Jian Azadi has become the motto of the demonstrations around the world. How do you assess this situation about Rojhelati Kurdistan's political parties and Hizb Democratic Kurdistan Iran's not accepting even Peshak, and so declaring that it is a foreign and it's not related to Rojhelati Kurdistan, while Peshak's motto become the motto of demonstrations in Iran and around the world. So, gotta expose. That's the question.
Spas, Bayan, with you or shall I?
Well, I mean, I think I don't know the answer to question, but please go ahead. I'd like to hear your view as well. Yes. Please.
Okay. Yes, Kaksai, thank you very much for your question, which is one of the controversial one, which I think no one own Kurdistan alone. Okay, neither Pajak or KDPI or Komala. Okay, so Kurdistan is the land of the Kurds. And the problematic here is, and it is quite color my answer by my own view, okay, is not, this interview I haven't heard, but I know this kind of offer coming very often. And it is just like, again, these Pajak, KDPI, Komala bring to the surface this issue, which is not just related to Pajak, Komala and KDP, but also the society, which is like in Rojhelat, the opinion toward especially Pajak, okay? And calling external, I don't know. The thing is, we have a principle in Rojhelat, myself included, and as I said, it's quite colored by me. I think we say in Rojhelat that political parties created by other forces in other parts of Kurdistan are not like actually good things to include in this movement. Why? Because the movement, the history of the Kurdish movement, especially in Rojhelat, has many examples of brutality and exploitation taken by forces of the Kurds in other parts of Kurdistan. We have the KDP, okay? And I have done a lot of research. I have written openly. I always say openly as well. It's related to Pajak and PKK, this claim, okay? So PKK are personally, I like say PKK is the bravest movement when it comes to Bakur, but you cannot come and claim for the people in Rojhelat. Why? Because it is a geopolitics. We have a very dirty geopolitical condition, okay, which means that every forces of the Kurdish movement of the Greater Kurdistan has historically and until now, for by force, beyond their wishes, has some reliance of the land of the neighboring countries. In Bakur, they have to some sources, have connection with the Iranian government. KDPI with the Iraqi government in its time. So, okay, so it is better we pay solidarity rather than interfering. And what KDPI, Komala say in terms of Pajak say, okay, if you disconnect with PKK, because PKK has relation with Iran, you cannot have relation with a government and became the leading of this movement. Similar one, we say this same complexity. PKK is not allowing any other parties to operate in Bakur, especially in other part of Kurdistan. So it is quite controversial and contradictory, okay? So it's not really alone related to Pajak, but Pajak not just being a sister party, actually, a sub-organization of PKK in Rojhelat. I think it is very problematic. And the first thing we actually experiencing in terms of fear that, having the flag of PKK in the border, if anything happens in Rojhelat, it's just like actually a call for Turkey to come to Rojhelat, okay? So I think that it is encouraging. I'm not saying it's happening, or maybe PKK do that, but it is a risk. Because you said assess, it is my assessment, actually, it will be very problematic. And sending this one, I think rather than KDPI and Komala are rejecting, definitely. I think Pajak is not also very cooperative as they say, okay? Because they try to actually enforce their hegemony. And I think the way they are, these political parties, especially in this sensitive moment, are acting, it is bringing so many uncertainty in addition to other things. So it is my assessment, which I think Bayan had very right in the beginning. She said, I'm not very optimistic. I think it is one of the fears. So I think if they want, Kurdish political party in Rojhelat should be Rojhelati. It's not about to dividing Kurdistan. It's about the reality of the Kurdish movement. And the Kurds actually have developed this different sense of Kurdishness and Kurdish national interest. Okay, so I think better to pay solidarity to each other rather than coming and became leading the movement in other parts of Kurdistan. It will serve the Kurdish movement in the Greater Kurdistan much better. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your analysis. It was great. Thank you.
Any question in the Zoom platform? There wasn't any. We're up with our time. There is one question from the Facebook platform, but in all honesty, it sounds really similar to Mustafa Hamoud's question. Allan have covered it with his answer. I'll just briefly read it for you. If you have anything to add on there, Allan, you are more than welcome to do so. The question is from Facebook platform by Ahmad Rasool. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your valuable panel. My question is for Dr. Allan to know his opinion about the possibility of suppression of the Jina movement by government. And if this happens, don't you think there would be a massive bloodshed and Iranian regime's revenge on Iran people, specifically in Kurdistan? Allan, do you have anything to add here? As I said, to me, it's quite similar to Mustafa's question.
Yes, it is definitely. I think that it will be a bloodshed. We also are expecting, not because it is not important, but as I said, Gelek Azadi Devet, people who want freedom, they have to pay the price. I think we are not because I'm in a safe place, but because I also have been a son or daughter of the Kurdish movement. So I think if you sit silent, and you will easily become the subject of not just suppression, but assimilation, and then soon you will disappear from the map. So I think I'm glad that people are ready to take this fight, despite the prices. I know it is ethically, it is very not right thing to encourage people while you are in the safe place, but I think that because you asked for me my view, I think that is the right thing people are doing. Sorry.
We've initially aimed to finish this at 8:30. We're about 10 minutes behind our schedule, which is quite good, to be honest. So I'd like to thank you all for both our speakers and the participants that spared their time to be with us on this webinar. We aim to have similar events where and when needed with any Kurdish related topics that might come about. And unless the two speakers have remark, we finish here and close here. Do you guys have anything to add? Allan and Bayan Khan?
Thank you very much. No, I have nothing to add. Just a good evening to everyone.
Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you, and Kak Mithat for hosting this event. Thank you. And Kak Ahmed as
very
well.
much. And until next time, all the best to you all.